Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am literally so thrilled you're tuning in today, because we are embarking on a really fascinating journey. We're diving deep into the hidden psychological architecture behind a very specific and often misunderstood type of person, the perpetual listener. You know exactly the type, right? Heck, maybe it's you. It's that person who is constantly absorbing, analyzing, always listening, but almost never speaking up about their own life. So in this explainer, we're going to map out exactly why the human brain builds this invisible fortress and how it really impacts the way you navigate the world. Okay, so let's set the stage with a super relatable scenario. Picture your typical friend group dynamic. You're all sitting around a table, and one by one, everyone's just pouring their hearts out, venting about a terrible boss or crying over a messy breakup. And there you sit, the ultimate safe space. You're nodding, you're chiming in with the perfect comforting advice. In the moment, it feels like you're just being this incredibly reliable friend. But then the night ends. You go home, and suddenly you feel absolutely drained, almost like a ghost in your own life. You know literally everything about everyone else, but no one really knows what you're going through. So why exactly does that happen? Section 1. The Shield of Silence. You see, this behavior, it isn't just about being a good listener. It's actually a highly complex, deeply subconscious way your brain manages safety. It's called emotional self-protection, and we can define this as using silence and an intense focus on others as a literal shield to avoid the risk of being ignored, dismissed, or hurt. Think about it for a second. If you grew up in an environment where expressing your own pain was met with dismissal, or maybe it just never felt safe to speak up, well, your brain took notes. It learned to choose silence to prevent any further hurt. By focusing 100% on other people, you brilliantly create this protective barrier. Because as long as you're listening to their story, you never have to risk being ignored when trying to tell your own.
Section 2. Controlling the chaos. Now, imagine walking into a super chaotic family gathering, or maybe a really tense workplace. Instantly, you step right into the fixer role. You listen, you soothe, you manage the vibe to keep everything perfectly calm. But look at the hidden dynamic at play here. You are actually tying your worth to being useful. Calming everyone down, being the one who gets it, it makes you feel needed, right? It makes you feel valued. But man, is it deeply exhausting. You're basically turning social chaos into something you can control, but you're doing it entirely at the cost of your own emotional reserves.
Section 3. Hiding in plain sight.
Okay, let's dive into where this all starts. How does a person learn to become this invisible pillar of support? Well, it often boils down to a belief, carrying an immense amount of emotional weight. I'm not that important. Psychology shows us that if your emotions were ignored, sidelined, or maybe constantly compared to others when you were a kid, it plants this really damaging false belief deep in your subconscious. Slowly but surely, you start to believe that your own internal world simply doesn't matter quite as much as everyone else's.
And this connects directly to what psychologists call insecure attachment patterns. Basically, this is the quiet, nagging belief that you must constantly earn your place in a relationship rather than just naturally having one. Perpetual listeners will often use their incredibly supportive role to secure this insecure attachment. The thought process is basically, hey, if I'm the perfect listener, if I'm the one always solving their problems, they won't leave me. It's like you're paying rent for your relationships through your silence and your support.
Which leads us to a pretty painful realization. You essentially learned to make yourself easier to keep. If you're listening to this and nodding along right now, I really want to validate your experience. You likely learned to shrink yourself down, to avoid taking up any space, and to hide your own needs just so you wouldn't be perceived as a burden to the people around you. You figured out, probably at a young age, that the less friction you cause, the safer your relationships feel.
Section 4. The Internal Processor. But hey, it isn't always rooted purely in trauma or avoiding being a burden. Our brains just don't all handle overwhelming information the same way, and this brilliantly illustrates the difference. On one hand, you have external processors. These are the folks who literally have to talk in order to think. They vocalize everything to figure out how they feel. But on the other hand, you have internal processors, the perpetual listener. You guys need to reflect, analyze, and process entirely alone before you can respond clearly.
This right here is a massive paradigm shift. You stay quiet not because you have nothing to say, but because you actually have way too much to say. Putting those intense, chaotic feelings into words in real time, that can feel completely overwhelming. So taking on the role of the listener becomes a much safer, much quieter way to make sense of the world. totally free from the pressure of having to formulate an immediate, perfect reaction.
Section 5. The fear of being seen. Beyond just how your brain processes data, there is very often a hidden fear pulling the strings here. Being the perpetual listener keeps the glaring spotlight firmly on someone else. It lets you hide safely behind the potential of who you could be, rather than risking immediate judgment for who you actually are right now. Because think about it, if you really speak up and you're truly heard, it removes all your excuses. It puts you in a highly vulnerable position where people finally see the real you. And for a lot of people, it is infinitely more comfortable to just stay safely tucked away in the background.
Section 6. The quiet strength. Now, I want to make something absolutely clear. This isn't exclusively some sad story of fear and trauma. Not at all. Being a perpetual listener can actually reflect profound emotional maturity. Some people draw real solid confidence from within, rather than needing constant external noise and validation. You might just have a remarkably high tolerance for solitude. You don't feel the burning need to forcefully prove your point in an argument, simply because your validation is internal. You value authentic experiences and deep observation way more than being the center of attention. And let me tell you, that is a very quiet, very powerful strength.
Section 7. Actionable steps forward.
So the crucial point is how we move forward from here. We've mapped out the psychological why, but how do you actually break out of the shadows when you decide you want to be seen? Well, first, recognize the pattern. You have got to stop overgiving just to prove your value. Your worth is inherent. You do not have to earn it by constantly fixing everyone else's problems. Second, acknowledge your needs. Understand this deeply. You aren't replaceable just because you finally decide to take up space and share your own struggles. A real friendship holds space for you too. And third, accept your processing style. It is completely okay to honor that your mind works differently and needs time to process internally. Just don't use that processing time as a permanent place to hide from the world.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to really chew on. You have spent so much of your life building a safe harbor for everyone else. But what happens when the perpetual listener finally decides to speak up and be seen? The truth is, the world misses out a lot of brilliance when you stay quiet. Sure, it might feel terrifying to lower that shield for the first time, but on the exact opposite side of that fear is the genuine two-way connection you've been listening to everyone else talk about for years. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today, and I highly encourage you to start letting the world hear your voice.